Walt Grassel, just because you couldn't doesn't mean you can't. Just because you couldn't doesn't mean you can't. Walt Grassel.
When I was in first grade, I had a horrific experience with a cat. I was sitting at our dining room table doing my homework. You could hear my mom in the kitchen doing dishes, and you could smell the aroma of our spaghetti dinner. And then my paper began to get wet, one drop at a time, from my tears of frustration. My homework paper was divided into 3 sections. At the bottom of each section was a word. And my mission, whether I wanted to accept it or not, was to draw a picture that went with that word. Ball, no problem. Tree, no problem. Cat, big problem. There was no way that I could put lines on a paper that it in any way resembled a cat. And my parents, they had the patience of saints. They brought me pieces of scratch paper, many pieces of scratch paper. Over and over I tried to draw that cat. My original homework paper had so many erasers on it, it looked like one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Finally, many hours and many tears later, I can't do this! Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and anyone else who can't. The next morning I went to school, and my parents gave me a pristine note to give to my first grade teacher, Mr. Garcia. That note explained how I really tried and tried and tried to do the assignment. At least that's what they told me it said. And that day, I labeled myself as someone who can't. As I got older, I did what any normal person does. I collected labels. I was an A student, but when I had to get up in front of the class, I would get paralyzed and nervous. And I didn't look so smart. And I labeled myself someone who had stage fright, someone who couldn't get up in front of an audience and do anything. When I was in 8th grade, I wanted to go to a technical high school, Bosco Tech. And Bosco had an entrance exam. Then in addition to English and math, it had a mechanical aptitude section. A few weeks after the test, we went to go see the school counselor, Brother Joseph. Young man, which shop do you wish to go into? Electronics. Good. If you had said mechanical, you would have to have a top. I had no mechanical aptitude. About 6 years after I graduated from Bosco, I bought a condo, and I decided I needed to hang a screen door. The first time I tried to hang it, I put the holes on the wrong part of the door jamb. The second time, I put it on the right part of the door jamb, but the door opened the wrong way. The third time, it was perfect. I can't. In the early 2000s, my brother was out visiting from Texas. We were supposed to get together for lunch, but I called him up to cancel because I had a drippy shower and I had to call a plumber. When we were talking on the phone, he said, I'll come out. We'll figure it out. So my brother came out, and while we were working on the shower, he told me, never call a repairman at the very first time. Always try and fix it yourself. If you can't fix it or you make it worse, then call the plumber or whatever. You'll save lots of money. So while we were fixing the shower, my brother also fixed my thinking. He told me, just because you couldn't do something before doesn't mean you can't do it now. Imagine that. My little brother taught me a lesson. Just because you couldn't doesn't mean you can't. few years later, I was watching TV, surfing the channels, and I came across a drawing show for kids. It was called Imagination Station with Mark Kistler. And he taught kids how to draw cartoon-like figures, but he taught them drawing principles. So I taped that thing on my VCR and played it back, and I taught myself how to draw. Now, I'm no Leonardo da Vinci, but I can draw. A few years after that, I mentored a high school robotics team in the first robotics competition. And we had a very successful robot that I led. I can do mechanical design. In 2006, I joined Toastmasters. In 2008, I took improv and stand-up classes. And I've now reached a détente with stage fright. Now I share with some of my fellow Toastmasters, why don't you take improv or stand-up classes? Well, I'm not funny. I could never do that. I can't. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. How do you think? Just because you couldn't doesn't mean you can't. Madam Toastmaster.